Hey everyone, Mike's here. Now, if you've seen my previous videos, you're probably wondering why I'm talking about this show again. Well, in the video where I reviewed every Spider-Man series, I feel like I didn't go into enough detail as I wanted to, so I wanted to make a video to talk about just how great Spider-Man the Animated Series is on its own without talking about any of the other Spider-Man shows. Just like what I did with the Spectacular Spider-Man. Because, I wanted to go into more detail about how this show's so great. So yeah, I hope you enjoy this video, and if you do enjoy it, go do the subscribing and stuff. Yeah, and now, let's talk about Spider-Man the Animated Series, and how it's Marvel at its peak. Okay, now, while in the intro I did say I wasn't going to talk about the other Spider-Man shows, I feel like I do have to talk about them so as to, compare them to this show, to show what's different about Spider-Man the Animated Series compared to all the other Spider-Man shows prior. So I constructed this little timeline so that you can see all the Spider-Man shows all the way to the animated series. So here it is on screen, and as you can see, the first one was the 60s show, then they had the two live-action Spider-Man shows in the late 70s, and then they had the two 1981 Spider-Man shows, and lastly there was this show. While these shows aren't bad interpretations of Spider-Man most of the time, with these, they don't really say anything special about Spider-Man. They're just a fun, wacky Saturday morning cartoon of Spider-Man stopping bad guys and such. And that's where this show really shines, in the fact that it tells more than just a really basic story about Spider-Man fighting crime. There's more to this series than just that. So I feel like when we're talking about this show first, we definitely have to talk about some of the stuff behind the scenes. Now, I'm going to try and keep this brief. Basically, the higher-ups in Marvel just wanted this to be another Saturday morning cartoon Spider-Man show where Spider-Man just goes and stops the bad guy. Nothing really important happens. They basically just wanted a show to sell toys. But then, what happened was, they got a new person to run the show, John Semper Jr., and he actually wanted to make it, serialized, actually have a story going on in the show. And even though the higher-ups didn't want that to happen, he still made it that way, and the show was really successful because of it. So yeah, if you want to thank someone for just the way the show is, with its serialized storytelling, it's definitely John Semper Jr. Now obviously, a show can only be so great without having great characters. So let's talk about the main characters in this show. First, we obviously have to talk about the character whose name is literally in the show, that being Spider-Man. Like I said in the other video, Christopher Daniel Barnes is perfect as Spider-Man, and he's definitely in the top 3 there with Josh Keaton and another Spider-Man, which I'm not going to say because I want you to try and figure it out in the comments. But he just does such a good job as Spider-Man in this show because his Peter Parker feels just ripped directly out of the comics with just the way he acts. Because one of the major complaints about the live-action Spider-Man is that they're only bits and pieces of the Peter Parker from the comics, but this is just full-on Peter Parker. No bits or pieces or anything. This is the full package. And also, of course, a lot of the other characters in this show are also great. For example, Mary Jane, she's actually cool in this show. What they did with Felicia Hardy was interesting, making her, more like Gwen Stacy, because, they didn't want to kill Gwen Stacy. Eddie Brock is great. I love the redemption arc they give him. They show a side of J. Jonah Jameson that you wouldn't really see until a lot later into other comics and stuff. Wilson Fisk is a really great villain because, even though he's just really evil, they still have moments where they make you feel bad for him. And you can say that for quite a few of the villains in this show. Like, for example, Scorpion, who just wants to live his life and get out of the Scorpion suit. Or both of the Green Goblins, who clearly aren't just pure evil, but instead they have the Green Goblin taking control of them. Just all of these characters in this show are awesome because pretty much every single character in this show is like the best iteration of them outside of the comics until like the Spectacular Spider-Man. That's how great all the characters in this show are. For crying out loud, they even made Morbius an interesting character. Morbius. They actually make him cool in this show. Now, I want to say this before I start talking about another great part of the show, and that's just, this is the best way to have Spider-Man in a world with other heroes, period. Because, Spider-Man crosses over with a lot of heroes in this show, and it's just wonderful. Because, the thing that's important about Peter Parker in, a bigger Marvel universe is that he's younger than most of the other heroes, but he's just as experienced as them. It kind of stinks that, they cut some of that stuff out from like other Spider-Man media, like the shows, for example. But because here, while Spider-Man is younger than most of the other heroes, like I said, he's just as experienced as them, so they don't have to go with that angle of, oh, he's just a kid, he's messing up in front of all the heroes. No, he is just as competent as the rest of them. So that's great. And that's exactly how other pieces of Spider-Man media should show Spider-Man working with other heroes as. Now, there's another major thing I want to talk about, and that's the masterpieces of story arcs they have in this show. For example, it had great stories like the alien costume storyline with Venom, the fight with the Sinister Six, the crossover with X-Men. While this wasn't a major storyline and it was just one episode, I gotta mention the episode which is based on the kid who collects Spider-Man. Obviously the Green Goblin storyline, the story where Peter got framed for committing a crime, where they had Daredevil in that story arc, that was just awesome. And obviously the Secret Wars and Spider Wars storylines. Those two storylines were exceptionally great. All of them are just so insanely good. Like, there are a couple storylines here which aren't that great, but even then they're still pretty good. Yeah, this show just has a ton of great story arcs, all of which are great to watch. Now, I've been talking about how great this show is, and yeah, it is great. Now, there are some problems people will have with this show, but that I personally don't have. And there's really two things off the top of my mind. One, the cheesy dialogue. Yeah, you can tell this show was made in the 90s, but I personally really enjoy it. And second is just the amount of quote-unquote censorship in this show. Because, like, people constantly talk about the amount of censorship in this show. For example, the fact that they couldn't call the Sinister Six the Sinister Six. They call it the Insidious Six. Or the fact that Spider-Man barely throws any punches in this show. And some stuff which is just really absurd. Like, for example, Spider-Man wasn't allowed to accidentally jump on a pigeon. Like, that was an actual thing they were told they couldn't do. But the thing is, it's not really true, because, like, this show had just the same amount of censorship as most other shows in the 90s. It's just people decided to blow it out of proportion and make it a bigger deal than it really was. And even then, it's not really that noticeable unless you're purposely trying to look for it. So yeah, those are just a couple problems people have with this show that I don't really see as big problems. And you know a show is good when those are the types of problems people have with it. Now, unfortunately, like all great things, Spider-Man the Animated Series came to an end. But the thing is, this series is really weird in the way it ended, because no one agrees on the way it actually finished. Because most people believe that this show is canceled, but the actual thing is that the show is only slated for 65 episodes. And so the 65 episodes happened, and it wasn't renewed, meaning the show wasn't really canceled, it just ended. And while there were some plans made for season 6 by the creators of the show, that stuff was most likely made after the show had already finished airing. So they probably would have done a season 6 if given the chance, but in the end, the show wasn't canceled. It's just the 65 episodes were up, and the show wasn't renewed for a new season. And it's as simple as that. So yeah, in conclusion, this show is a masterclass piece of storytelling, which was the first thing to ever actually, dive deep into the characters in the lore of Spider-Man. And no matter how many new versions of the character they make, this is the one that just truly, perfectly captured Spider-Man and the world of Marvel. See, it's the best iteration of the Marvel Universe. That's why I called it Peak Marvel in the thumbnail. See, it's not clickbait. So yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed this review of Spider-Man the Animated Series. And if you did enjoy it, go check out some of my other content. And if you really enjoyed it, subscribe to see when my newest videos come out. And yeah, I hope you all enjoyed. Face front, true believers. And I'll see you all in the next one.